Our next guest also has a connection to Fort Lewis, much like you, Alfie. Marilyn Strickland. Marilyn, you were born in Seoul, Korea, but you moved to Tacoma in 1967 when your dad was stationed at Fort Lewis, and you grew up in South Tacoma. I only moved here to Tacoma in 1999, but something I've learned since being here is that if you talk to a person who grew up in Tacoma, the questions you have to ask is, where'd you go to school? Where'd you go to school?
Edison Elementary, Gray Junior High, Mount Tahoma High School.
All right, you were correct. That is what your record says. Marilyn, you also graduated from the University of Washington and you hold an MBA from Clark Atlanta University. You've served on boards for Sound Transit, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and the Democratic Mayors Association. You've appeared on Meet the Press and National Public Radio. Big thumbs up for that. And you're a trustee with the Urban Land Institute. You've been recognized by the National League of Cities, Women in Municipal Government for outstanding local leadership, and you were recognized as the 2015 Washington Trade Hero by the Washington Council on International Trade. All that, and you're serving your second term as the mayor of Tacoma. Bravo. Amazing private and public sector experience. You have experiences and lessons from a range of places that you can be sharing with us. But today, you're sharing a lesson that you learned back when you were 10 years old. What was going on at that time?
10 years old on the playground at Edison Elementary School. So everyone has had the opportunity to talk a bit about the photo. So I believe this was my second grade class photo, and that was my favorite daisy dress. It had these giant daisies all over it. And my mother, who is Korean, she's 88 years old. So like your mother, she often says, today I'm gonna go visit the old people and talk to them. And I'm like, Mom, you are old. Oh yeah, I know, but. So my mother had a philosophy when she would send me to school. And it's based on her life experience. So my father was African American, born in Noonan, Georgia, in rural Georgia in 1920. He joined the service to send money home to his family. When he joined the military, it was segregated until President Truman integrated the Army. He met my mother in Seoul. We're here in Tacoma in 1967. So she's sending me to school, and if you know South Tacoma neighborhood, it's not like most of the kids show up there dressed to the nines like they're going to church when they go to school every day. But my mother always said to me, and my father, you have to be twice as good to get half as much. Your father is black. I'm an immigrant. People are going to underestimate you and assume the worst about you. So you always have to look really good and be the best student. And coming back to the philosophy of you have to be twice as good to get half as much. So let's fast forward a couple years to the playground. So we have recess at elementary school. We all go charging out there, and we play games, we run on the field. So 2 square, 4 square, 6 square. Is there anyone old enough in this room to remember those games? Right? You lined up, and when someone got bounced out of a box, you went in, it was your turn. And one year, there was a girl who dominated the 6 square box, and she just decided she didn't like me. So she would call me names, she would be disparaging to me. You know, kids are kids on the playground. No one came to my rescue, no one stood up for me. So this went on for a couple of weeks, and I went home from school one day, and my parents could tell that I was sulking about something. And I told them what happened. I said, oh, this girl's really mean to me, she picks on me, you know, never any physical contact, but just very disparaging and made me feel badly. So after about the 3rd or 4th week, my father just kind of had enough of it. No, he did not go to the school and beat up a girl. He decided to enroll me in karate lessons. So down the street from Edison Elementary School on South Tacoma Way on 54th and South Tacoma Way used to be a place called Steve Armstrong Karate School. I think there's a pawn shop there today. But I was there at Steve Armstrong Karate School. They enrolled me in the karate lessons, and there were a couple things about going to that karate school that were interesting for me. Number 1, I was the only girl in the class. Number 2, I was the youngest in the class because most of the boys were middle school aged. And number 3, I was the smallest in the class physically. So to help deal with my being bullied on the playground, my dad said, you know what, you're going to take karate lessons. Now, he didn't do this so that I would become physically aggressive and start trying to fight with people on the playground. He wanted me to be able to defend myself. But I think more than anything else, he wanted me to be confident, because bullies can tell when you're scared. They have a sense about them, and they like to pick on people that they think they can intimidate. So I go to my first karate lesson, and when you do karate lessons, you wear what's called a gi. So it's your pants, and you're kind of like a tunic that folds over, and you wear a belt around it. So I was a white belt, because that's where you start. And I remember going to my first karate lesson with my gi in my bag. I said, okay, where do I go change my clothes? There was no girls' dressing room at Steve Armstrong karate lessons. So they had a space for me up this rickety old staircase in an attic above the karate school that was dusty and filthy. And I would go up there by myself, change my clothes, leave my clothes up there, and then do my karate lessons. The other thing I remember too about the karate school is that the floor was filthy, because every time after the karate lesson was over, my feet were just covered in soot at the end. But it was part of the lesson. So what do you do at karate school? You do your warm-up calisthenics, you do push-ups, you do sit-ups, you do the warm-ups. And then you do these exercises which are called katas. And a kata is a routine of about 7 or 8 moves. And in Ishinryu karate, the kata is meant to assume that you are being attacked on all sides, from the front, from the back, to the left, to the right. So it's a series of moves that you do, and they're not necessarily aggressive moves, they're defensive moves. So you go on defense to block a punch or a kick, but then at the right time, you land a punch, or you give a really hard kick. So you do these katas, and that prepares you to spar. What's sparring? It's when you fight someone. So imagine me as a 10-year-old girl doing my katas, and now it's time for me to spar with some of my mates in my class. It was a room full of boys, mostly teenagers. They were going to take it easy on the little girl because she probably wasn't that good. So as I first started sparring with people, I could tell they were pulling back and not really doing what they would do. But as I got better and more confident, you would see the boys start to kind of get into their regular routine as well. I got to the point where I was in the class and the instructor would say, look at her, she can do 25 push-ups. Look at her, she does her kata with perfect precision. And then I would start to fight in tournaments, and I was being very successful. Now, in a small community like South Tacoma, word gets around when kids are doing things. So the doors to the karate school would be open during the summer, and kids would ride their bikes past on their way to the drugstore or the burger joint. And then I started getting a little audience. And so there were kids from my elementary school who would come on the bench and watch me taking karate lessons, watching me spar. And within a few weeks or months, I really wasn't getting picked on the playground anymore. And it wasn't necessarily because I went in there with my fist blazing saying I was going to try to fight someone. It was because I had this quiet confidence about me. If anyone came after me, I could probably defend myself. And that really changed the trajectory for me on the playground. Now, I share that story with you because you don't think about taking karate lessons as a 10-year-old translating into your adult life, especially one as the mayor of a mid-sized city in America. But let me make an analogy here. Often when we're in politics, the field on which we play is often like a playground. There are times when you are attacked. There are times when people come after you. And sometimes your best offense is stepping back, being patient, being confident, and being able to defend yourself. In fact, in karate, there are times you are silent and you don't move. And one of the things that I've learned is that sometimes in politics, silence does the heaviest lifting for you. People often expect you to be aggressive and assertive. They'll say something, do something. How can you put up with that? And what I've learned is that sometimes, like Muhammad Ali used to say, rope-a-dope. Let them wear themselves out. Let them keep fighting and keep punching. And sometimes things just kind of take care of themselves. And so the karate lessons have taught me infinite patience, what it's like to walk into a room with confidence, and what it's like being underestimated. As a woman of color, I am used to being underestimated. Every time I've run for office or thought about running for office, I was told I would lose. I've had someone try to talk me out of it. I've been told to wait my turn. And sometimes that advice was good. But whenever I decided to pursue running for office, I have always won. So I think there's an opportunity there to think about what quiet confident means, and always remembering for me, you have to be twice as good to get half as much. Now, when I think about applying this to the daily routine of what we do in politics, whether that's having conversations with my colleagues about policy issues, whether it's dealing with the public, whether it's figuring out what's the best policy to move forward, I think we often underestimate, especially in today's climate, the ability to stand back, listen, take stock, and not have a knee-jerk reaction to every slight, to every word, to every crazy post on social media, and just taking the time to get the facts and find out what's what. Sometimes things end up taking care of themselves, and you don't have to do anything except rise above the fray. And sometimes you need to get your hands dirty and get in there, but you do so from a place of power when you take the time to be patient, to look at the whole scene, and sometimes just letting some of the drama play itself out. We live in a high drama political climate with people who have a lot of opinions about a lot of different things. I tell people that the hardest thing about being an elected official is having to practice restraint. Restraint from saying the first thing that comes to your mind when someone says something or says something that's totally untrue. But also having the ability to just take a step back, letting things play out, getting information, and making decisions on your own terms to get the best outcome for the people that you serve. It's not always easy, but I will sit here and tell you today, in 2017, when I was asked to talk about my experience and to share a story, I didn't know that I would go back to Edison Elementary School on the playground in a 6-square box and talk about being bullied, taking karate lessons, being the only girl, learning how to defend myself, and how that skill set of patience and tenacity, knowing when to stand up and knowing when to stand down, has probably served me really, really well. So those are my life lessons, and thank you very much for letting me share my story with you.